Oh my God. I have got such a trouble.
How are we doing here? Lines are okay for me. I don't know if you
I'm good with it.
We just semi it. All right. Still last call out there. Yeah, that's a good idea. Go ahead and semi it back that way. We'll put that extra chair near Dalton in case somebody's a little more circular. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the 2 o'clock. I am absolutely delighted with deep pleasure to introduce Rob to do his qualifying presentation today. I have known Rob for a number of years now, and he's been working as we all are towards our life purpose, mission, our life endeavors, and it's been I just love watching him. So I really do. So thank you very much for being here, and I look forward to his presentation today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I would like to first begin by telling some stories. My name is La, and that's how I am called in this culture. And I want to tell a story about how that name came to me. I grew up in a place called Martinsville, Virginia, and Martinsville, Virginia was named after the Martin plantation. But when things changed, then they couldn't call it that anymore, so they called it Martinsville. And so I always knew that the name that I was born with would someday change. And so in the process of changing that, I went nameless for 3 weeks. I literally declared myself. I came into a space, and that was especially at the time when spoken word was hot and it was moving through my body. And so I would declare at the spoken word arena, I'm no longer this name. I am no longer this name. I am nameless. You call me nothing because I don't know it anymore. I don't know what my name is. And so I went that way for 3 weeks and no one called me anything. It was bizarre. It was a freeing experience. But at the end of that, a name did come to me. And this was about 2003. And I didn't know exactly what I was doing. I was feeling something. I was feeling something in the moment. And I knew I was following something very powerful, very wise. And so I named myself Law. That was the first name that came. And I knew it was it because when I just heard it, and it was like a voice out of nowhere. I just heard it and I said, oh, that's it. Like everything in my body, like tingles, like it was a total experience, and my names came backwards. And 9 years later, I still did not know any of what it meant. I knew part of what it meant, but I could not know the entire piece until I was ready. And 9 years later, I go and I find the original tribes where I'm from in Africa. And they tell me, you named yourself this and we've been talking to you and preparing you to come to us for so long. All of the shamanic training that you've had has prepared you to come to us. It took this long. It took 9 years for me to find you. And that's when they told me, your name is Lampon, and you have inherited this. These are the shamans in your lineage. This is the way your ancestors have practiced for millennia. This is where you are from in Africa. These are your villages, and you have inherited these things. You must come back, and you must do ceremony. Do you know how many people? Do you know how many people get the opportunity to do that? You see, in that moment, all the work that I have done to erase the wounds of slavery, it was in. There was no interruption. The lineage was holy. That's a right passage. And I didn't know it was going to take 9 years when I started. And I didn't know it was going to take me to the depths of my soul, to the depths of humanity, to untold pain and suffering. I didn't know any of that. I was just following a calling in my soul. I didn't even know it was going to take me to shamanism. I didn't know anything about what an ancestor was, that there was even such a thing. And so that's where I want to begin now. In academia, we have this idea that ceremony is something that indigenous people do, but we don't do it here. That's really the assumption. Whereas indigenous people, we have this assumption that everything is a ceremony. Everything is a ritual. Everything we do is a ceremony. And so there's this idea that research and that academic work can now become a ceremony. That's a new idea. And so what I'm beginning to question is what's really possible when we begin to explore research as ceremony, learning as ceremony, when we begin to explore ceremony in the academic context, what's really possible. One of the things that's possible is that the voice of the voiceless, of those who have not been able to speak, those who have been marginalized to the shadows of history, those who are outside of the walls of academia, those who are part of the third world and the fourth world, if they a couple of blocks over. It's not some other country. Even the voices of the trees, the voices of the rocks, the voices of the most ancient parts of the universe, all of these voices, these intelligences of communication, these sources of communication are possible to actually come and speak when there is ceremony. It is a normal, it is a natural thing in indigenous cultures for more than humans to be in the conversation. A normal and expected thing. And so that is how we begin. And we don't, in this place, this is an autonomous zone. And so we don't marginalize our ancestors in this space, not in this space. That is how things begin. Because if we can remember the origin of where we are from, the point of origin in all of creation, then no one can take us off track. Then we all become unstable. So that's what needs to happen now, is that the ceremony needs to form. We need to acknowledge some things. Some things need to be acknowledged. Some things need to be acknowledged. A ceremony has formed. A ceremony has formed. A ceremony has formed. A ceremony has formed. Let the beat drop. A ceremony has formed. Let the beat drop. A ceremony has formed. Elegwa, open up the gate. Eshu, open up the gate. A ceremony has formed. Let the planet, Grandmother Timbalu, Pachamama, come here and bear witness. A ceremony has formed. Let our collective ancestors come here now. A ceremony has formed. I call upon my ancestors from the farm, from the Nina. A ceremony has formed. I call upon the ancestors here that are to speak. A ceremony has formed. Let the earth bear witness that a ceremony has formed. Open the way to smooth our communication difficulties so that we may understand one another, heart to heart, in the original tongue of the universe. the original spoken word. Yay! So it's ceremony. That's really a beautiful expression. easiest time. Like puberty is, when traditional rites of passages are being we're engaged in it, whether we acknowledge that or not. And I invite you to begin to engage and acknowledge the bigness, the epicness of what you're doing here. Don't just let it be mediocre, because we've had enough of that. And mediocre breeds injustice. So, any questions at this point? Really? Oh, okay. I want to give you some information that the way in which I was able to find and complete my rites of passage was through visiting, finding many shamans, and I scanned many shamans. Is it almost done?
But no, we still have
Okay.
4 questions. So.
Okay. So be thinking about questions now. Like I apologize if it seems like a lot, but sometimes the energy just comes through, and so I want you all to understand that the way that I found my way home, which is pristine information, I really cannot. I hope you understand how big this is. That Michelle Obama, she don't know this. Oprah Winfrey, she don't know this. They have DNA analysis, but they cannot tell you what they really know. They don't know a whole it. And so the way that I had to find that is I had to go to a very ancient oracle, 1,000-year-old oracle. And it was off the beaten path. It took ages, 4 years for me of actively seeking to find this oracle. All off of the back of his back. And it took that in order for me to find out this information. And by the time I was looking for it, I forgot that I was looking for it. And so it just came out of me. And so I want to say to you to begin to think that there's higher intelligences on this planet that haven't necessarily been revealed collectively. And many of those intelligences rest with indigenous people. That's not to say indigenous people or modern people are more evolved than one another or anything like that. It's just to say there's a lot to appreciate about all that we are as humanity. Within hip hop, within young people who are interested in hip hop, there's a lot to appreciate within them. That there might actually be some genius that's actually communicating. That there might actually be this sacred source that is actually communicated through them. And one of the things that we do in this culture is that we want to devalue it until it's too late. But what I've seen time and time again is that uniqueness and brilliance will manifest in the most unlikely places. And it might come from the streets. The solution that we're looking for might not be in the place and from the people that we think it's going to be. And so we have to open ourselves. My suggestion as a methodology to engage that is to begin to open ourselves to our own shadow, to investigating what really challenges us personally and what really needs to be loved about us personally, and also investigating our intuition, opening our intuition, and doing what is necessary to develop our intuition. And I would highly suggest to incorporate that in scholarly work, and that is done in some spaces in academia. For instance, in integral development, I would suggest integral life practice as a way of integrating that into scholarly work, into mission development as an actual aspect of what you're doing, as an actual aspect even of your research methodology. So do I have any questions at this point?
I have a question. Would you talk a little bit about linear versus spiral dynamics? Okay, so can you talk a little bit more about that? Is that saying that our existence is more than just, you know, what's on the surface as far as dealing with our five senses? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Well, to address that five senses piece, yeah. That's the thing about intuition development is that each of us have a, it's part of the human anatomy. And it's something that you go to anybody in Africa, any African priest of an oracle, they're going to tell you, you know, straight up, like that. That's where your nose is that can smell around the planet. You know, that's where that eye is that can see what's going on over there. They'll just tell you where it is, and then they'll tell you, okay, these are the herbs, this is the ceremony, you need to activate that. It's not a we trying to figure this out process. It's not a, you know, does this really exist? Are we really clairaudient, clairsentient, claircognizant? It's like, yeah, and you gotta develop that. And so, yeah, for every five senses, there are clair senses as well. Um, Spiral dynamics is one idea of human development, or a map of human consciousness. And the idea of spiral dynamics is really mapping planetary and cosmic consciousness and the evolution of that consciousness throughout time. It's just one map among a lot of different human development maps. It's a field of study that has been developed since about the 1950s. This is really based on Claire Graves' research. I highly recommend it. A lot of people, it's very challenging and very sensitive material. But I also find that within the model of spiral dynamics, there's a place and a guidance for a radical transition in consciousness where we're able to actually open up to the, you know, we're actually asking the question, okay, I may have been taught to perceive reality this way, and what is actually happening? What is actually being seen on this planet? Like, there's language that I was taught, and then there's what's behind the language. What's the precognition? What's the world behind the world? What's the world within the world? Real existence. Right?
I'm just thinking about collective rites of passage.
Yeah.
And I was trying to think about examples of collective rites of passage that have happened that might be a part of some of what you're talking about. And the two that I came up with that I wonder if you might speak if this fits into the context that you're thinking about. One is the truth and reconciliation process in South Africa and around sort of this collective societal healing process. And then the other is some of Gandhi's work around collective nonviolent resistance. And I was specifically thinking about the Salt March, where literally thousands of people walked to the ocean together. And maybe those do or don't fit into the way you're thinking of collective rites of passage, but I'd be curious if you could expand.
The way that I feel them as collective rites of passage is the idea of history as a river. Yeah, a history as a river, and these two things being the same thing as time being a spiral, that not like linear, like we think of time like this, you know, very valid, right? And then, but but time might actually be a spiral. It might actually be a dance, a community, something flowing, you know, something might have a little more thin, right? And something malleable. So, you know, it might actually, the malleability might actually be another aspect that isn't necessarily feminine or masculine. It might actually be androgynous. And there's a connection with gender and history. Because when we speak about the planet, itself, we're really speaking about androgyny, and that looks. I'm answering the question in a spiral way. Is that what you are speaking about? These larger historical movements are what I perceive as part of it from the perspective of the planet, or from the perspective of a larger consciousness. This is history that's actually moving. This is where history is actually happening. And I believe that we as humans can actually sense where history is occurring. And we can cause where history is occurring. Y'all get what I'm saying? It's like y'all know, y'all can look and see what's happening in Ferguson right now. It's something much bigger than what, just what it appears to be. These are historical vortexes on the planet itself. And they can be engaged. You can go and participate that. And what's more is that our energy fields, the actual ceremonies in which we engage, can actually become part of this historical participatory process. Is that answering any of your questions?
Sure.
No. Yeah, I think that also the idea of collective rites of passage is more of an art as well. And, it's the idea, I relate it to the idea of planetary intelligence. And taking, like, most of us think about rites of passage, we might say, adolescent youth become adults, right? Like, that's the general awareness of that. But thinking about collective rite of passage and collective growth and the collective coming of age or maturity, or the collective, the dawn of a collective of its own collective voice, of another level of intelligence just dropping down on us all of a sudden, like the beat dropping. Like, and we just like, oh, y'all hear this? Y'all hear this? Like, we all in another communication. It's like a total dimensional shift all of a sudden. And that's what I'm saying. We got to see that in our lifetime. And whether we know it or not, I feel that we're causing that. And that is a thought, an idea whose time has come. That's all I have to say. I feel that I covered what I wanted to say in this presentation.
There's still time for some more comments. And just my general take of watching faces is it's a lot to take in. And it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. Is there anything to say, even if it's not a formulated question?
How will you carry this forward? What's your plan?
Publish more books, and the other thing is obviously write my thesis, which is next. So the next presentation will deal with these ideas, but specifically taking a look at how they manifest in educational institutions and the practicalities of that. So a little bit, this is more of the theoretical and the artistic and the ceremonial journey, and then the next is the thesis and how it can be best communicated to an academic and a popular audience. So, yes.
When you talk about concepts like shadows, I always wonder whether, like, where on a spectrum do you put actively pursuing some of these ideas versus being aware of them? I mean, shadows sounds kind of omnipresent, like they're around and we're just not aware of them. So is it? But I know at the same time that you also mentioned how much you've worked and looked for it. So is there a tension there between that kind of just opening up general awareness, or does it require like focused attention?
Well, there's a general educational piece about human psychology as to what the shadow is, and that, in encountering one's shadow for the first time, I feel that one has a natural intuition of what to do with that. But, our shadows are, there's an awareness piece, and then there's a work at it piece. With the collective shadows, for sure, because most people aren't even talking about that. most people aren't even saying, the collective shadow of what happened in Mississippi in whenever the 4 little girls were killed is actually affecting me. Most people can't even do work around that and know how that's affecting their souls. So that's a collective shadow. What's going on in South Africa, man? It's a lot of collective shadows, here. So most people aren't even doing work at the individual level. Like they just don't, like that's the nature of shadows. People don't want to acknowledge it because it's painful. It's part of us that's split off. And I also think that's why I'm very interested. The spiral dynamics is also used by what's called interval theory. Some of you have probably encountered it. But I want to introduce the idea of interval life practice. And it's actually a book that you can get on Amazon, but Ken Miller and a couple of other people wrote it. And the book is about integrating shadow, but also integrating body and integrating the mental aspect of life and integrating the spiritual aspect of life, or the intuition development piece, so that you're able to develop all of these parts and actually come into some type of flow with it. And that's the personal development piece. Now, as far as the collective development, obviously that's still in the first steps and first stages, but I personally in my life have witnessed collective shadow work being done. And I'm telling you, that's some powerful stuff because you're tapping directly into the energy of history. Because that's where the river is beneath it's an underground river.
When you speak of that, it kind of makes me think of something related to genetic memory. So like if a person whose ancestry is, is linked to Africa, if you were to go back, if you were to go to Africa, this is your first time visiting, but you and your ancestors were taken from here to be enslaved, and then going there, and then having like experiences that kind of like physically, take you on a, I guess on a trip. Like you cry or you start to feel something, and it's kind of like an uncontrollable feeling that you have, and it just kind of reminds me of something like that. It kind of reminds me of something similar to, I guess, a form of genetic memory.
It absolutely is. There are some that it's not. There aren't any studies that can prove that. But that is a popular idea that I have ran across in some unscholarly texts. And for me personally, I know some people choose to relate the idea of shadow to that, and some people don't. I find that those who do, in my personal observation, haven't done any studies, but those who relate the idea of shadow to genetic memory and going into one's genome, they end up being able to tap into collective shadow work and being able to actually make some collective change. Yes.
Closely related to genetic memory, you might look at psychoevolutionary theory. And that's, in a sense, another way of saying genetic memory. I mean, it's not, because it's not genetic memory, but we also know that genes can morph even in a lifetime. Yeah. And psychoevolutionary theory is similar, and it says we have that collective piece in here, which is a lot of language development, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and those, what we might call genetic memories, and they might be, there's no way to test it. And and there might, I mean, who cares if they do? And there's all this whole like psychoevolutionary theory. So those two things might be useful to be looking at.
I'm just trying to make sense of my thoughts. So what you're saying is that individual dimensional shifts would lead to a common understanding or point. So that two people experience a shift, that if you follow that all the way through, it leads to a singular understanding.
I think that's a possibility that many people can find. I think it depends on the answer to that is yes, no, maybe, and yes and no. Exactly. 5 answers. Okay. Because it's very multidimensional and complex for that. It's not. There are many different I guess perspectives on that, and I don't want to get into that. And I'm already like a little overwhelming, but there's a way I can add to that, you know, mapping each of those responses. You got to.
So I'm sort of interpreting this as it applies to my experience, and rewinding a little bit to the identity quest. My experiences with adjudicated kids, and I feel like their search for identity is where a lot of their problems, I guess, manifest. Whether it's with gangs, drugs, the hustle itself, whatever it is. But they do find identity in hip hop, and I guess my concern is that how do you nurture that identity without nurturing the misogynistic side of it?
And that's what Sarah comes to. Because, they have counselors, but they don't have anyone who can actually see them and see that energy, see the lightning within them, communicate with the lightning, and actually nourish the lightning. Ceremony is what nourishes the lightning. And see, when you have at-risk students, a lot of times what they are craving more than anything is ceremony, a deep ceremonial experience. That's what most people are actually craving. That's what they're really craving when they're looking for drugs. And when they see many things, behaviors, that are adverse to their health or to society, a lot of times it is because they are either crying for help or they've gone astray, or that energy that's coming through them, that thunder that's coming through them, it's all like this instead of, someone just actually doing the ceremony and saying, doing what is proper that needs to be done to stabilize that. But there are ceremonies. My answer to that is that there are ceremonial ways to be doing that. And that those types of ceremonies, people can be trained to do that for people. And people can be trained to develop their intuition to see directly into a problem, to actually make an intervention into somebody's life. And they can be trained also to develop their voice in hip hop, whether it's any medium of hip hop, so that they can actually manifest the true brilliance and the potential and the destiny of why the energy of hip hop is moving through them. Because I see hip hop as a spirit itself. So, yeah, it is possible, but shamanic work ceremony is not being engaged. Institution. Yeah, we had some.
So you talked about the planetary intelligence that's coming through, whether we're aware of it or not. And so, in thinking about the collective, is it important, or how important is it that we be conscious of this planetary intelligence? And on an individual level, how can we get to that point, that we can become aware of it?
On an individual level, I think that it is actually communicating with the planet itself. I think there are certain ceremonies in which individuals, even groups of people, can do to begin to invite that intelligence in, and to communicate with that intelligence. And actually, the process that I really recommend in doing so are prayers and offerings to the earth. I'll write my first book up here because I published a lot of these rituals in the first book, which is still available on Amazon. So I'll write that up here in a little bit. But it's basically, it gives these rituals how you actually make the offering to the earth and begin to activate that communication. But yeah, it takes ceremony as the answer to a lot of these things are indigenous ceremony. Like, that's really where it's going to go back to, is understanding the ceremony within our bones, understanding the ceremony within our genes and our cellular genetic memory. If we begin to understand these things, we begin to experience ourselves as ancient, experience ourselves as epic, experience ourselves as indigenous and rooted to this planet, then there's a power that comes along with that. There's a say in the affairs of the planet that comes along with that. So I can speak more with you after that. I have two.
I'm just curious about your spoken word, and I don't know if this is an appropriate space or if you're in a space to share that, but I'm in that
My experience with spoken word is I'm very protective of it because what occurred for me in my journey with spoken word is that my words became connected to some real power, basically. Like nowadays, people can actually get up and they can do shadow work in front of the people. They can do political analysis. Well, I was initiated, and when I got initiated, something happened to my words. Where if I got up and said certain things, it's always on behalf of what is moving through me. And that's really the spoken word. So now, the spoken word manifests as invocations. It manifests as openings of actual planetary portal energy, which one did open up earlier in this. And so the way in which my spoken word actually manifests nowadays is one in invocation in the flow of ceremony, and also in the oracular part of that, which the traditional name for that is called divination. And that art of development of intuition, well, there's a particular development that actually develops a spoken word specific for a person or a situation right on the spot. Like literally, like comes in like that. And like I wanted to show y'all, like to open up the gate so that y'all know there's something deeper. There's something even more powerful about this methodology. And that's what these young people are reaching for because they know. They know what they're right. Guys, I see some other
Comments over here?
I think it's finished. Okay. Okay. So yeah, that is where I'm at with that. And, thank you all.
Thank you.